And this, my father said, sweeping one hand toward me like I was a footnote he'd almost forgotten, is my daughter, Serena. He tilted his scotch glass in my direction. She wanted to be a doctor once, couldn't quite manage it. Now she pushes paper for the state health department, counts other people's money for a living. He let out a small, warm chuckle. 200 people in tuxedos and evening gowns chuckled with him. A paperwork career for a doctor's daughter. Someone near the front tables said, "Oh, Harold," in the gentle, laughing way people do when they want to seem like they're correcting someone while actually enjoying every word of it. I didn't move. I was standing at the back edge of the crowd with my work phone in my clutch purse and a manila folder I had printed that afternoon tucked under my arm, and I waited for the laughter to pass the way you wait for a wave you know you can outlast. Before I tell you what happened in that ballroom 40 minutes later, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been introduced to a room full of people as the family's quiet disappointment? Leave a comment below. I spent years thinking I was the only person who knew what that specific kind of humiliation felt like, and I am done keeping that feeling company alone. My father moved on to his next introduction, an orthopedic surgeon, a real estate developer, a hospital board member with a name everyone recognized, important people, people with gravity. He smiled and gestured, and the room rippled with warm approval, the way rooms do when they are in the presence of someone who has learned to perform significance very, very well. What he did not know, standing at that podium in his custom suit with his name on a plaque in the lobby 11 years running, was this. The Beckett Family Foundation had submitted an application for an $18 million federal grant through the Health Resources and Services Administration, Rural Health Expansion, Underserved Communities, a proposal that used words like dignity and access and equity in every third paragraph. That application had been sitting on my desk for 4 months. I am the Deputy Director of the Office of Inspector General for the State Department of Health, Division of Financial Compliance. My office reviews federal healthcare funding requests for fraud indicators, financial irregularities, and compliance failures before state certification is issued. Without my signature, HRSA does not release a dollar. My father had been sending letters to the governor's office for 6 months, demanding to know why his application was stalled. It never occurred to him to ask his daughter. I had been waiting 6 weeks to decide whether to process the denial through standard channels or to be here tonight. The application itself made the decision for me. What I found in those files was not a gray area. It was not an oversight. It was deliberate, documented, and very expensive. So I waited for his laughter to settle, and then I walked toward the stage. The click of my heels on the marble floor was the first thing that changed the texture of the room. People turned. My father turned. He watched me cross toward the podium with an expression that moved through confusion, mild amusement, and then a careful practiced pleasantness that was really just a public face for control. He thought I was about to cry. That was his working theory of me, that I would make a scene that would embarrass me worse than it embarrassed him, and he would handle it with the gracious patience of a man who has dealt with difficult people his entire career. I stepped up to the podium and held out my hand for the microphone. He hesitated just long enough to tell everyone watching that he wasn't sure. And then he handed it over, because 200 witnesses make every instinct point toward courtesy. I turned to face the room. "My father is right," I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. The room leaned forward. "I do work for the State Health Department. Specifically, I serve as Deputy Director of the Office of Inspector General, Health Division, Financial Compliance. My office reviews federal and state healthcare grant applications for fraud, abuse, and financial mismanagement." I heard someone near the center table set down a glass. 4 months ago, the Beckett Family Foundation submitted an application for an $18 million federal grant to expand rural health access. I opened the folder. My team completed our review last Tuesday. My father's face stopped doing the work of appearing pleasant. The foundation submitted overhead projections representing 68% of total requested funds. That is 22 points above the federal compliance threshold for administrative costs. I flipped a page. The sound was small and precise in the silence. A significant portion of that overhead is categorized as facility modernization. The itemized budget includes custom cabinetry and millwork for the executive director's private office suite, imported stone countertops, a climate-controlled storage unit for the executive conference room described in the proposal as a client hospitality amenity. I looked up at the front row. Not one line item in the facilities budget addresses the patient examination rooms the proposal claims will serve 1,200 rural families annually. A woman in the front row, a hospital board member whose name I recognized from the foundation's letterhead, set her champagne glass down very slowly. Section 7 of the application lists 3 primary construction contractors. All 3 are limited liability companies registered in Delaware within the past 14 months. The registered agent for all 3 is the same individual. I paused. That individual is also the foundation's director of operations. She is legally married to the foundation's executive director. I looked directly at my father. He had gone the color of the white tablecloths. Under federal regulations governing private foundations, specifically IRC Section 4941, it is a prohibited act of self-dealing for a disqualified person, including officers, directors, and their immediate family members, to use foundation assets in transactions that provide direct financial benefit to themselves or persons they control. What your proposal describes is not a community health expansion. It is a series of construction contracts paid with federal tax dollars, awarded to companies controlled by individuals who stand to profit from foundation disbursements. I closed the folder. The Beckett Family Foundation's application for HRSA grant number HE 2025-0318 is formally denied due to material evidence of financial self-dealing and grant fraud. All documentation has been referred to the Federal Office of Inspector General and the IRS Tax-Exempt and Government Entities Division. I set the microphone on the podium ledge. I stepped down from the stage without looking at him. I looked at the front row, the donors, the board members, the people whose goodwill he had been carefully accumulating for 11 years, and I watched something shift behind their eyes. The pleasant fiction of the evening had cracked clean through, and everyone in that room could feel the air change. I made it to the edge of the ballroom before his voice reached me across 200 people. Serena. Not a greeting, a summons. I kept walking. I pushed through the service doors behind the ballroom. The shift was immediate. Marble gave way to painted concrete. Chandeliers gave way to fluorescent tubing. The warm ambient noise of the gala became the low hum of kitchen ventilation. I had been in enough hotel service corridors in my professional life to know they all smell the same. Industrial cleaner and old cooking grease and something faintly metallic like cold pipes. I was 20 feet from the exit door when I heard the service entrance crash open behind me. I stopped. I turned around. My father had carried his Scotch glass through 200 people and a set of service doors without seeming to notice he was holding it. His bow tie was slightly off-center. His chest was moving faster than it should have been. What in God's name was that? His voice had lost every layer of the public man. What was underneath was something raw and stripped and genuinely frightened, though he hadn't identified it as fear yet. That was a formal grant denial, I said. You'll receive written confirmation on Monday. In front of. He stopped, his free hand pressed against his forehead. Do you have any idea who was sitting at those tables? Do you understand what you just did to me in there? I denied your grant application on documented grounds of financial misconduct, I said. I understand exactly what I did. You humiliated me. He pointed the Scotch glass at me. A small amount sloshed over the rim onto the concrete floor, in front of the hospital board, in front of people I have spent a decade building relationships with. Do you know what it took to get those people in the same room? His voice was climbing towards something uncontrolled. You just lit 11 years on fire because you wanted to play government official in front of an audience. I presented documented findings, I said. That is my job. Your job. He said it the way you say something too small to be worth discussing. You have been in that office for 8 years doing... What? Waiting for this. Is this what all of it was for? Some kind of long-term grievance project? I looked at him steadily, the glass, the loosened tie, the man who had just described my career as a consolation prize to 200 of his closest witnesses. I have been working this case for 4 months, I said. It is a case. Your foundation is a subject in an active review. I kept the file open because the findings required it. He took a step toward me. His voice dropped to something that was supposed to feel threatening. You think this is where it ends? I have been in this city for 30 years. I have relationships at levels you cannot begin to reach. One phone call and your department gets a performance review that takes you apart piece by piece. I will make your little Inspector General's office wish it had never heard the name Beckett. You're welcome to try, I said. He was searching my face for the pressure point. I watched him find it. Your grandmother, he said. The corridor felt smaller. Northgate Memory Care, he continued, his voice going careful and deliberate. Private room. Full memory support staff, occupational therapy 3 times a week. The foundation has been contributing to her monthly care costs since her diagnosis. He tilted his head slightly. As the foundation's executive director, I controlled the disbursement schedule. He let that hang between us. It would be unfortunate if those contributions were interrupted. He thought he had found the one lever that would work. He had been wrong about me for 8 years. He was wrong about this too. Call them, I said. He blinked. Northgate, I said. Right now, put it on speaker if you want. He didn't move. She isn't there, I said. I transferred her to Kensington Senior Living 6 weeks ago. I paid the first year of private care in full out of my own savings. She has a corner room with a south-facing window and a garden courtyard. There's a therapy dog named Biscuit who comes through on Wednesdays, and she has already decided he is the best part of her week. I held his gaze. Your foundation's contributions to her care stopped mattering to me 14 months ago, when I started making sure they didn't have to. The scotch glass lowered to his side. The ice shifted against the crystal. I have been setting aside money for this for 5 years, I said. $300 every month for 61 months. I refinanced nothing. I borrowed from no one. I told her not to mention it to anyone, because I knew that the moment you found out I was building a safety net for her that didn't run through you, you would find a way to use it against me. You taught me that. You taught me very early to never let anyone see what you're actually protecting. He stared at me. I watched the architecture of his assumptions about me begin to fail. He had a complete and detailed working model of who I was. The daughter who wanted his approval, who could be leveraged with the right pressure, who would eventually fold if the stakes were personal enough. And I had been quietly, deliberately outgrowing that model for years, without ever showing him the work. You planned all of this, he said. Less an accusation than a realization. I did my job, I said, and then I prepared for the parts I could predict. The predictable. He set his glass down on a corner of the service cart beside him. His hands were not completely steady. Serena, whatever I set up there tonight, I had a few drinks. That was thoughtless. You know I respect what you've built. Don't, I said. He stopped. Don't rewrite it now, I said. You have said versions of that for 8 years, in private, in kitchens and car rides when there was no one else around to hear it. Never once in a room where it would have cost you something. I thought about the last dinner we'd had as a family, 3 years ago, when he had described my career to his colleague as something with government compliance, some kind of review office. I'm not entirely certain what the title is. I thought about the Christmas before that, when he'd told my cousin I was between opportunities. I thought about being 24 years old in his study, with a graduate school acceptance letter, and watching his face do exactly what it had done tonight. You have had 8 years to say something different in front of other people. You chose not to. Tonight you chose your words on purpose, and you used a microphone with a room full of people who matter to you. He opened his mouth. I'm not finished, I said. He closed it. You calculated that I was a safe target. You assumed that whatever I did for work, it existed somewhere completely separate from anything that touched your life. That was your mistake. You stopped paying close attention to me a long time ago, and that didn't feel like a risk to you because you didn't believe I was worth the attention. I picked up my folder. You handed me a microphone tonight in front of 200 people. Because you were certain the worst thing I could do with it was embarrass myself. That certainty was wrong. He was quiet. The referral, he finally said. His voice had changed again. The aggression was gone. What remained was smaller. The IRS referral. Is it already in the system? Filed at 4:47 this afternoon, I said, before I got dressed. He sat down on the edge of the service cart. It was the first time in my adult life I had seen my father sit somewhere that wasn't a chair he chose deliberately. The contractor situation, he said. There's context to that. My wife's name being on those LLCs. That was a carryover from a previous business arrangement. It was never designed to. That explanation is available to you, I said, through legal counsel. In response to the OIG inquiry, that is the appropriate venue for it. Serena. His voice broke on my name, just slightly. The foundation is 30 years of work. If this goes federal, the reputational exposure alone could. I know, I said. That foundation is the thing I built. I know what it means to you, I said, and I know what it actually is. I read every financial statement going back 6 years. I know the difference between the two. I looked at him one final time, this man who had been the weather of my entire adult life, something I dressed around without ever being able to change. I hope the people you were trying to impress tonight enjoyed their dinner. The menu looked very nice. The beef tenderloin especially. I took out my work phone. His eyes went to it immediately. I turned the screen toward him. It was a secure upload confirmation. Files transmitted, 22. Recipients listed. Federal OIG Regional Coordinator, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, State Attorney General Financial Crimes Unit. I have been in a running secure upload session since you finished your remarks in the ballroom, I said. The photographs I took of the Foundation's itemized event invoices, the most recent Form 990 filing, all 3 contractor LLC registration documents, and the email correspondence between your assistant and the registered agent are now in federal custody. I put the phone back in my clutch. I don't need anything else from tonight. I turned toward the exit. You could have just sent a letter, he said quietly, to the space behind me. You had grounds for a denial 6 weeks ago. You could have mailed a letter and been done with it. I stopped with my hand on the push bar. A letter would have been manageable, I said. You would have made calls. You would have reframed it as a bureaucratic technicality, changed the contractor names, resubmitted with different language. You would have found another angle, and next spring you would have been standing at another podium in front of another room of important people. telling them that your daughter counts paperclips for the government. I looked back at him one last time. I decided I didn't want to attend that version of next year. I walked out. The air outside was cold and had just started to rain. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and let it hit my face. The adrenaline was leaving slowly, the way it does when you have been holding something tightly for a long time and you finally set it down and your hands don't quite know what to do with themselves. I drove to Kensington. It was past visiting hours, but the night staff had my name in the system and they knew me by sight now. I had been coming every Sunday for 6 weeks, ever since my grandmother settled in and started calling her room hers. She was awake. She was sitting up in bed with a crossword puzzle book open on her lap, and when I came through the door, she looked up with the particular expression she has when she already knows that something happened and is waiting for me to confirm it. "It's done," I said. She studied my face carefully. "The grant business." "All of it." She set the crossword down on the blanket and folded her hands over it. Tonight was a good night for her, the kind where she is fully present and sharp, and I was grateful for it in a way I could not have put neatly into words. "And him?" she said. "He'll have attorneys to call first thing tomorrow," I said. "Tonight he is sitting somewhere with a very expensive drink and a very significant problem." She made a small dry sound, almost a laugh, not quite. He always did confuse what something looks like with what it is. I sat on the edge of her bed. Outside, the rain had picked up against the window. "Are you frightened?" she asked. I thought about it honestly. "Not of what I did," I said. "Maybe of the waiting, of the part where it's out of my hands and I just have to let the process run." "That's always the hardest piece," she said. "Doing the thing is one kind of hard. Letting go of it afterward is a different kind entirely." She put her hand over mine. Her hand is small and very warm, and she has worn the same 3 rings for more than 50 years. "You didn't do this for revenge," she said. "I can tell the difference in this family. I have been watching this family long enough to know exactly what revenge looks like. This wasn't that." "No," I said, "it wasn't." I drove home through the rain and sat in my parked car in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. I thought about my father sitting on that service cart in the hotel corridor with his Scotch glass and his loosened bow tie, and his face doing something I had never seen it do before. I thought about the specific moment when the certainty left him. I did not feel triumphant. That is the thing about doing something because it is right rather than because it feels satisfying. The emotional return is quieter. It is less like winning and more like finally setting down something heavy that you have been carrying so long you forgot it wasn't part of you. I had a career my father spent 8 years reducing to a punchline. I had financial independence he did not control. I had a grandmother in a room she deserved, with a garden view and a therapy dog and staff who knew her name, and not $1 of it ran through him. I had built all of it in the years he was not watching me, in the years he was confident I was too small and too manageable to bother tracking. That invisibility was not something that happened to me. It was something I used. I stayed quiet. I stayed small inside his estimation of me. I let him hold on to a version of who I was that was safe for him, while the real version moved freely underneath that perception, building what I needed to build, learning what I needed to know, waiting for the moment when it would mean something. People think being underestimated is only a wound. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it is a door that someone left unlocked because they didn't think you were worth locking out. Walk through it quietly. Do the work. Let them keep laughing at the version of you they invented. By the time they realize that version was never really you, you'll already be finished.